The story begins not with a mushroom cloud rising over a destroyed city, not with the blinding flash that vaporized 160,000 human beings, but with a young boy standing in a field in rural Illinois, his face tilted toward the sky, watching something that would change his life forever. It was 1927, and 12-year-old Paul Warfield Tibbets Jr. had just witnessed something magical, a barnstorming pilot performing aerial acrobatics over Quincy, Illinois. The plane was a fragile thing of wood and fabric, held together by wire and hope, but to young Paul, it represented freedom itself. He watched as the pilot looped and rolled against the endless blue, and in that moment, something ignited within him that would never be extinguished. He turned to his father, a practical man who practiced dentistry on Main Street, and declared with the absolute certainty of youth, "I'm going to fly." His father, Paul Tibbets Sr., shook his head. "You'll study medicine," he said firmly. "Flying is for circus performers and daredevils. It's not a career. It's not respectable." But the seed had been planted, and seeds, once planted in fertile soil, have a way of growing regardless of what the gardener intends. Young Paul began saving every penny he could earn, delivering newspapers, mowing lawns, doing odd jobs for neighbors. At 15, he took his first airplane ride, paying a barnstormer $5 for a 10-minute flight over the Mississippi River. As the plane climbed, as the ground fell away beneath him, as the world transformed into a patchwork quilt of fields and forests, Paul Tibbets knew with absolute certainty that he would spend his life in the sky. There was no other path. There could be no other path. He enrolled at the University of Florida in 1933, ostensibly to study medicine and fulfill his father's wishes. But every spare moment was spent at the local airport, watching planes take off and land, talking to pilots, learning everything he could about the mechanics of flight. He joined the Reserve Officers Training Corps, not because he had any particular interest in military service, but because it offered flight training. In 1937, against his father's vehement objections, he dropped out of medical school and enlisted in the United States Army Air Corps. The pay was $78 a month. The living conditions were Spartan. The training was brutal. But Paul Tibbets was flying, and that was all that mattered. He proved to be a natural pilot. His instructors noted his calm demeanor under pressure, his precise control inputs, his ability to remain focused when everything around him was chaos. He soloed after just 8 hours of instruction. He completed flight training in record time. By 1940, he was a second lieutenant flying pursuit aircraft, P-40 Warhawks and P-47 Thunderbolts, over the skies of Georgia and Florida. But Tibbets was not satisfied with fighter aircraft. He wanted to fly bombers. He wanted to fly the big planes, the four-engine monsters that could carry tons of ordnance across oceans. In 1941, he requested and received a transfer to bombardier training, then to pilot training on the B-17 Flying Fortress. The B-17 was a revelation. Where fighters were agile and fast, the Fortress was solid and dependable. Where fighters danced in the sky, the B-17 plowed through it, absorbing punishment that would have torn lesser aircraft apart. Tibbets fell in love with the plane's rugged construction, its redundant systems, its ability to bring crews home even when half the engines were shot out. He logged hundreds of hours in the aircraft, learning every system, every quirk, every limitation. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Tibbets was a first lieutenant with over 1,000 hours of flight time. He was ready for war. But the war, when it came, was not what he expected. Instead of leading bombing raids over Europe or the Pacific, Tibbets was pulled from combat duty in 1942 and assigned to test pilot school. The Army Air Forces was developing new aircraft, new systems, new technologies, and they needed experienced pilots who could push these machines to their limits and report back on what worked and what didn't. Tibbets excelled at test flying. He had an engineer's mind combined with a pilot's instincts. He could feel when something was wrong with an aircraft before the instruments showed it. He could describe technical problems in language that mechanics and engineers could understand. He became one of the Army's most valued test pilots. In 1943, he was assigned to test the B-29 Superfortress, the most advanced bomber ever built. The B-29 was a marvel of engineering, pressurized cabins that allowed crews to fly at 30,000 feet without oxygen masks, remote-controlled gun turrets that could be operated from the comfort of the pressurized cabin, engines that produced more power than any aircraft engine in history. But the B-29 was also temperamental. The engines overheated. The pressurization systems failed. The remote gun turrets jammed. Test pilots were dying at an alarming rate. Tibbets lost friends, good pilots who climbed into B-29s and never came back. But he kept flying. He kept testing. He kept pushing the aircraft to find its weaknesses so they could be fixed before the planes went into combat. His work did not go unnoticed. In September 1944, Tibbets was summoned to Washington, D.C., for a meeting with Colonel John H. Doolittle, the legendary airman who had led the first American bombing raid on Japan in 1942. Doolittle was now commanding the 8th Air Force, but he had been called back to Washington for a special assignment. The meeting was classified at the highest level. Tibbets was told only that he was being considered for a special mission, a mission that could end the war. He was not told what the mission was. He was not told what weapon would be used. He was told only that he would be selecting and training a group of pilots for a task that required the utmost precision and secrecy. Tibbets accepted without hesitation. He had spent his entire adult life preparing for this moment, though he did not know it. Every hour in the cockpit, every test flight, every risk taken had led to this. He was given a list of potential candidates, pilots with extensive experience on B-29s, pilots with calm temperaments, pilots who could follow orders without question. Tibbets reviewed the files, conducted interviews, made his selections. He chose men who reminded him of himself, young, confident, technically skilled, but also humble enough to know that they did not know everything. He chose Major Thomas Farabee, a bombardier from North Carolina with a photographer's eye for detail. He chose Major Theodore Van Kirk, a navigator from Pennsylvania who could find any point on Earth using only the stars. He chose Captain Robert Lewis, a co-pilot from Massachusetts who could fly as smoothly as Tibbets himself. The unit was designated the 509th Composite Group. Composite meant it was a mixture of different types of aircraft and personnel. In reality, it was a unit created for a single purpose, a purpose so secret that most of the men who joined it did not know what they were training for. They were told only that they would be flying a special type of bomb, a bomb unlike any other. They trained at Wendover Army Air Field in Utah, a remote base in the middle of the Great Salt Lake Desert. The isolation was intentional. The secrecy was absolute. The men practiced high-altitude bombing runs, evasive maneuvers, long-distance navigation over water. They did not know they were training to destroy a city. They did not know they were training to kill 160,000 people. They knew only that they were training to end the war. Meanwhile, in laboratories hidden deep in the mountains of New Mexico, scientists were working on the weapon that would make the 509th Composite Group's training necessary. The Manhattan Project employed 130,000 people across the United States, yet most did not know what they were building. They enriched uranium in massive facilities in Tennessee. They produced plutonium in reactors in Washington state. They designed and assembled the bombs in a secret laboratory in Los Alamos, New Mexico, under the direction of physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. The work was dangerous. The science was unprecedented. The stakes were beyond comprehension. The bomb designed for the B-29 was called Little Boy. It was a gun-type fission weapon that used uranium-235. The concept was simple: fire one piece of uranium into another to create a critical mass. The execution was extraordinarily complex. The bomb weighed 9,700 pounds. It was 10 feet long and 28 inches in diameter. It contained 141 pounds of uranium-235, enriched to 80% purity. Less than 2% of that uranium would actually undergo fission. Yet that tiny fraction would release energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. The scientists who built it knew it would work. They had tested a plutonium version in the New Mexico desert on July 16, 1945. The test, codenamed Trinity, had exceeded all expectations. The desert sand had been vaporized into glass. The mushroom cloud had risen 40,000 feet into the sky. Oppenheimer had quoted the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." But the Trinity test was conducted in a desert, far from any population center. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima would be detonated over a city of 350,000 people. The scientists knew what it would do. They had calculated the blast radius, the thermal radiation effects, the casualties. Some of them signed petitions urging President Truman not to use the bomb on a populated area. They suggested a demonstration first, a warning to the Japanese. But the military and political leadership had made their decision. The bomb would be used. It would be used without warning. It would be used on a city. The war had to end, and end quickly. The invasion of Japan was scheduled for November 1945. Military planners estimated it would cost 1 million American casualties and millions of Japanese lives. The bomb could prevent that. At least, that was the calculation. Tibbets was briefed on the nature of the weapon in late July 1945, just days before the mission. He was taken to a secure room at Wendover and shown diagrams, photographs, technical specifications. He was told that the bomb would destroy an entire city. He was told that there was no defense against it. He was told that his job was to deliver it. He was not asked if he wanted to do it. He was not asked if he thought it was right. He was told it was his duty. And for a soldier, duty was everything. Tibbets accepted the mission without hesitation. He did not agonize over the morality. He did not question the orders. He focused on the technical details, the altitude, the speed, the escape maneuver. He would fly the mission. He would deliver the bomb. He would end the war. That was all that mattered. He named the aircraft after his mother, Enola Gay Tibbets. She had been a constant source of support throughout his life, encouraging his flying when his father opposed it, sending him care packages during training, writing him letters that he kept in his flight jacket. Naming the plane after her was his way of honoring her, of carrying a piece of home into the sky. He could not have known that the name would become infamous, that it would be synonymous with destruction, that it would be cursed by survivors and their descendants. To him, Enola Gay was simply his mother, a woman who believed in him, who loved him, who wanted him to succeed. The irony would not be lost on him in the years to come, but in August 1945, it was simply a tribute. The crew trained for the specific mission for weeks. They practiced the escape maneuver, a 155-degree turn immediately after bomb release, diving away from the blast wave. They calculated the timing to the second. They rehearsed until the movements were automatic. They did not speak about what they were doing. They did not speak about the consequences. They spoke only about the mission, the aircraft, the weather, the navigation. Compartmentalization was essential. If they thought about the 350,000 people living in Hiroshima, if they thought about the children, the families, the lives that would be extinguished, they might hesitate. And hesitation could be fatal. So they did not hesitate. They could not afford to. On the night of August 5, 1945, the crew gathered for a final briefing. The weather forecast was good. The target was Hiroshima. The primary alternate was Kokura. The secondary alternate was Nagasaki. The bomb was loaded in the early morning hours of August 6. Tibbets watched from the cockpit as the massive cylinder was winched into the bomb bay. He thought about his mother. He thought about the training. He thought about the war. He did not think about the 160,000 ghosts waiting for him over Japan. He could not afford to. At 2:45 a.m., the engines roared to life. The B-29 taxied to the runway. The crew boarded. The hatch closed. The world held its breath. Tibbets advanced the throttles. The plane lumbered down the runway, heavy with the weight of history. At 3,000 feet, the gear retracted. At 10,000 feet, they leveled off. The flight to Hiroshima would take 6 hours. 6 hours to think. 6 hours to doubt. 6 hours to wonder if they were doing the right thing. But in the cockpit, there was only the mission. There was only the flight. There was only duty. And for Paul Tibbets, that was enough. For now. The Enola Gay lifted off from North Field on Tinian Island at 2:45 a.m. on August 6, 1945. The runway was lit by floodlights that cast long, eerie shadows across the coral surface. The aircraft was heavy, so heavy that Tibbets worried for a moment whether it would become airborne before reaching the end of the runway. The bomb, little boy, weighed nearly 5 tons. Add to that the full fuel load, 6,400 gallons of aviation gasoline, and the aircraft was operating at maximum gross weight. Tibbets had calculated the takeoff distance a dozen times. He knew the numbers. But knowing and feeling are different things. As the B-29 rumbled down the runway, gaining speed incrementally, Tibbets could feel the weight resisting every foot of forward motion. At 110 miles per hour, he pulled back on the yoke. The nose lifted. For a heart-stopping moment, the main wheels refused to leave the ground. Then, at 115 miles per hour, the Enola Gay became airborne. Tibbets retracted the landing gear and began a slow, climbing turn to the east. Below him, Tinian Island disappeared into darkness. Ahead lay 6 hours of flight across the Pacific Ocean to the Japanese home islands. The crew settled into their stations. Navigator Theodore Van Kirk checked his instruments, calculated wind drift, plotted their course. Bombardier Thomas Farabee reviewed his bomb sight settings, verified the altitude calculations, checked the release mechanisms. Flight engineer Wyatt Dusenbury monitored the 4 Wright R-3350 engines, watching temperature gauges, fuel pressure, oil levels. Radio operator Robert Caron monitored frequencies, prepared weather reports, maintained communication with base. Tail gunner Theodore Van Kirk, no relation to the navigator, checked his .50 caliber machine guns, though they all knew there would be no enemy fighters to intercept them. The Japanese Air Force had been all but destroyed. What remained was being saved for the anticipated invasion. The initial climb was to 31,000 feet, the optimal altitude for the bomb run. At that height, the air was thin, cold, unforgiving. The cabin was pressurized, but the pressure was set to simulate 8,000 feet, not sea level. The men would be breathing thin air for 6 hours. Headaches were common. Fatigue came quickly. Tibbets had prepared for this. He had ordered oxygen systems checked and rechecked. He had instructed the crew to use oxygen continuously above 10,000 feet, not just when they felt the need. Hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, was insidious. It crept up on pilots without warning, clouding judgment, slowing reaction time, creating a false sense of well-being even as the brain starved. Tibbets had seen good pilots die from hypoxia. He would not lose his crew to it. The flight was smooth initially. The Pacific stretched below them, an endless expanse of black water broken only by the occasional whitecap. The stars above were brilliant, undimmed by light pollution. Van Kirk used them to verify their position, taking celestial fixes with a bubble sextant, comparing observed positions to predicted positions in his navigation tables. They were on course. The wind was favorable. They would arrive over Hiroshima at dawn, when visibility would be optimal for the bomb run. Tibbets checked his watch. 3:30 a.m. They had been airborne for 45 minutes. He glanced at Captain Robert Lewis, his co-pilot. Lewis was staring straight ahead, his hands resting lightly on the controls. Lewis had been with Tibbets since the early days of B-29 testing. He was a good pilot, steady under pressure, technically proficient. But Tibbets sensed something different about Lewis on this mission. There was a tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes that had not been there during training. Lewis was thinking about what they were carrying. Tibbets could see it. He wanted to say something, to reassure his co-pilot, to remind him of their duty. But what could he say? He was thinking the same thoughts. The difference was that Tibbets had learned to compartmentalize, to push uncomfortable thoughts into a corner of his mind and lock the door. Lewis had not yet mastered that skill. At 4:15 a.m., they crossed the coast of Japan. The islands appeared below them as dark shapes against the lighter gray of the ocean. Shikoku, the smallest of the four main islands, was their first landfall. Van Kirk confirmed their position. They were on schedule. Tibbets adjusted course slightly to the north, heading toward Hiroshima. The city was 120 miles inland, situated on the delta of the Oda River. It was a military headquarters, a hub of industrial production, a transportation center. It had been deliberately left untouched by previous B-29 raids. While other Japanese cities burned, Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, Hiroshima remained intact. The Strategic Bombing Survey had specifically exempted it from conventional bombing so that the effects of the atomic bomb could be measured clearly. The 350,000 people living in Hiroshima had no idea they had been spared for a more terrible fate. At 5 a.m., Tibbets ordered a systems check. The crew verified all instruments, all controls, all emergency procedures. The bomb was still secured in the bomb bay, its safety mechanisms engaged, its arming sequence not yet initiated. Farabee would arm it 30 minutes before the target. Until then, it was inert, a massive weight of metal and explosive that could not detonate accidentally. Tibbets had reviewed the arming procedure 100 times. He knew each step, each switch, each safety pin. He had insisted on multiple redundancies, on fail-safes within fail-safes. The last thing he wanted was an accidental detonation over the Pacific, or worse, over friendly territory. The crew knew the stakes. They worked methodically, checking and rechecking, verifying and confirming. There would be no mistakes. At 5:30 a.m., they received their first weather report from a B-29 that had flown ahead as a weather scout. The plane, codenamed Straight Flush, was orbiting over Hiroshima at 32,000 feet, reporting cloud cover, visibility, wind conditions. The report was good: scattered clouds at 20,000 feet, visibility unlimited, wind light and variable. Perfect bombing conditions. Tibbets felt a moment of relief. Weather had been a concern. If Hiroshima was socked in under heavy cloud cover, they would have to divert to the primary alternate, Kokura. If Kokura was also obscured, they would try Nagasaki. If all three targets were obscured, they would bring the bomb back to Tinian, a dangerous proposition, landing a B-29 with an armed atomic bomb on board. But Hiroshima was clear. They would hit their primary target. At 6 a.m., Farabee began the arming sequence. He removed the safety plugs, engaged the arming switches, verified the barometric switches that would detonate the bomb at the correct altitude. The procedure took 15 minutes. During that time, the bomb transitioned from inert object to weapon of mass destruction. It could now detonate. It would detonate when the barometric switches sensed the correct altitude, 1,900 feet above ground level. Farabee worked carefully, his hands steady despite the tension in the cabin. He had practiced this procedure dozens of times, but practice and reality are different things. In practice, no one died. In reality, 160,000 people would die. Farabee did not think about that. He could not afford to. He focused on the switches. The plugs, the indicators. He completed the sequence and reported to Tibbets, bomb armed. At 6:30 a.m., they received another weather report. Conditions over Hiroshima remained good. But there was a complication. A Japanese fighter had been spotted in the area. It was quickly driven off by American escort fighters, but it raised the possibility that the Japanese were aware of their presence. Tibbets doubted it. A single fighter on a routine patrol did not indicate early warning. The Japanese radar system was primitive, easily confused by the small size of a single B-29. They would not be detected until they were much closer to the city. Still, Tibbets remained vigilant. He scanned the sky, watching for contrails, for glints of sunlight on metal, for any sign of interceptors. There was nothing. The sky was empty. At 7 a.m., they began their descent to bombing altitude. They would make the bomb run at 31,000 feet, high enough to be above most anti-aircraft fire, high enough to escape the blast wave, but low enough for accurate bombing. Van Kirk verified their position. They were 40 miles from Hiroshima. 20 minutes to target. Tibbets felt his heart rate increase slightly. This was it. The moment they had trained for, prepared for, dreamed about. He glanced at Lewis again. The co-pilot was pale, his jaw clenched. Tibbets wanted to say something, but there was nothing to say. They had a job to do. They would do it. At 7:30 a.m., they received the final weather report from Straight Flush. Conditions were perfect. Cloud cover less than 3/10. Visibility greater than 10 miles. Wind at bombing altitude from the east at 15 knots. Tibbets could not have asked for better conditions. He gave the order, prepare for bomb run. The crew moved to their stations. Farabee took position at the bomb site, a complex optical mechanical computer that would calculate the exact moment of release. Van Kirk verified their course, made minor corrections for wind drift. Dusenbury monitored the engines, ensuring they would maintain constant speed and altitude during the bomb run. Karen prepared to transmit the bomb release signal to base. The tail gunner manned his position, watching for fighters that never came. At 7:45 a.m., they were 10 miles from Hiroshima. The city was visible below them, spread across the delta like a gray carpet. The Ota River divided it into 6 islands. Bridges connected the islands. Buildings clustered along the riverbanks. It looked peaceful from 31,000 feet. It looked normal. There was no sign of the horror that was about to descend. Tibbets felt a strange detachment. This was a city. It contained people. Families. Children. In a few minutes, most of them would be dead. But from this altitude, they were not people. They were targets. They were coordinates. They were objectives. Tibbets had trained himself to see them that way. It was the only way to do what had to be done. At 7:50 a.m., Farabee acquired the target through his Norden bomb site. The target was the Aioi Bridge, a distinctive T-shaped bridge that spanned one of the branches of the Ota River. It was easily identifiable from the air, a perfect aiming point. Farabee centered the crosshairs on the bridge. He made small adjustments to the bomb site, compensating for wind, for altitude, for airspeed. The bomb site calculated the release point automatically, using gyroscopic stabilization and mechanical computation to achieve unprecedented accuracy. At 31,000 feet, the theoretical circular error probable was 1,200 feet. That meant that half the bombs dropped would land within 1,200 feet of the target. For a conventional bomb, that was excellent accuracy. For an atomic bomb, it was more than sufficient. The blast radius would be over a mile. Precision was less critical than with conventional weapons. At 8 a.m., they were 5 miles from the target. Farabee had the bridge centered in his crosshairs. He was making final adjustments, fine-tuning the aim, ensuring that every variable was accounted for. The crew was silent. No one spoke. They watched Farabee work, watched the city approach, watched history being made. Tibbets kept the plane steady, maintaining exact altitude. Exact airspeed, exact heading. Any deviation could throw off the bomb site's calculations. The plane had to be a stable platform. Tibbets had flown thousands of hours. He had made thousands of bomb runs in training. But none of them mattered like this one. His hands were steady on the controls. His breathing was even. He was completely focused. There was only the plane, the bomb site, the target. Nothing else existed. At 8:14 a.m., they were 1 mile from the target. Farabee announced, 30 seconds to release. Tibbets felt his pulse quicken. This was it. The moment of no return. In 30 seconds, they would release the bomb. In 30 seconds, they would commit an act that would change the world forever. In 30 seconds, 160,000 people would begin their final minute of life. Tibbets pushed the thoughts away. He focused on the controls. He kept the plane steady. He did his job. At 8:15 a.m., Farabee announced, "Bomb bay doors open." The doors slid back, exposing the bomb to the slipstream. The wind roared through the bay. The plane shuddered slightly. Farabee made final adjustments. The crosshairs were on the bridge. The bomb site was computing. The release point was seconds away. At 8:15 and 17 seconds, the bomb dropped. Farabee pressed the release button. The electromagnetic shackles released. Little boy fell away from the Enola Gay. The plane lurched upward instantly, 5 tons lighter. Tibbets kicked the rudder hard to the right, banked the plane into a 155-degree turn, pushed the nose down. The escape maneuver. They had practiced it 100 times. Drop the bomb. Turn 155 degrees. Dive. Gain speed. Get away from the blast. The G-forces pressed them into their seats. The altimeter unwound rapidly. They were diving at 240 miles per hour, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the bomb. 43 seconds. That is how long the bomb fell before detonating. 43 seconds for 160,000 people to live their final moments. The bomb's parachute deployed, slowing its descent, giving the Enola Gay time to escape. The bomb fell through the thin air, accelerating toward the city below. People on the ground looked up. Some saw the parachute. Some saw nothing. They had no idea what was coming. They had no time to react. There was no warning. No siren. No air raid alert. Just a bomb falling from a clear blue sky. At 8:16 a.m., the bomb detonated. The detonation occurred at 1,900 feet above the Shima Hospital, 550 feet from the Aioi bridge. The flash was brighter than 1,000 suns. Temperatures at ground zero reached 4,000 degrees Celsius, hotter than the surface of the sun. People at ground zero were vaporized instantly. Their bodies turned to ash. Their shadows were burned into stone walls, into pavement, into steps, the only evidence they had ever existed. Buildings within a mile of ground zero were flattened. Concrete structures crumbled. Steel frames twisted. Wooden buildings burst into flames simultaneously. The blast wave traveled at supersonic speed, shattering windows 3 miles away, collapsing structures, rupturing internal organs. The thermal radiation caused third-degree burns up to 2 miles from ground zero. People's clothing caught fire. Their skin melted. Their hair burned off. Inside the Enola Gay, the crew felt the shockwave hit the plane like a giant fist. The aircraft shuddered violently, throwing them against their harnesses. Tibbets fought the controls, struggling to maintain stability. The plane jumped, rolled, yawed. For a few terrifying seconds, it seemed as if the blast might tear the wings off. Then it stabilized. Tibbets leveled the plane, climbed back to bombing altitude, turned to look back at Hiroshima. What he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. A mushroom cloud was rising from the city, purple and black and red, climbing to 40,000 feet, spreading out at the top like a monstrous flower. The base of the cloud was a boiling mass of fire and smoke and debris. The stem was a column of churning earth and vaporized buildings. The cap spread across the sky, blocking out the sun. It was beautiful in a terrible way. It was awe-inspiring. It was horrifying. Tibbets could not look away. Captain Lewis, sitting beside him, began to speak. His voice was shaking. "My God," he said. "What have we done?" Tibbets did not answer. He kept watching the cloud. It continued to rise, continued to spread, continued to grow. It was visible for 170 miles. People in other cities saw it and wondered what had happened. People on other planes saw it and knew the war had changed forever. Radio operator Karen, watching from the tail gunner's position, described it later. It was like looking at a cauldron of bubbling black oil. The cloud was boiling up and down and sideways. It was the most awesome sight I've ever seen. And I hope to God I never see anything like it again. Tibbets turned the plane away from Hiroshima. They had their confirmation. The bomb had detonated. The mission was successful. There was nothing more to do. They began the long flight back to Tinian. The return flight was silent. No one spoke. No one made jokes. No one celebrated. They had just destroyed a city. They had just killed 160,000 people. There was nothing to celebrate. They monitored their instruments, checked their fuel, navigated by the stars. They did their jobs. But their minds were elsewhere. They were thinking about what they had seen. They were thinking about what they had done. They were thinking about whether it was right. Tibbets thought about his mother. He thought about the plane that bore her name. He thought about the irony that Enola Gay, a woman who had raised a son to be a good man, now had her name attached to the most destructive weapon ever used in war. He wondered what she would think. She had died in 1943, 2 years before the mission. She would never know what her son had done. Perhaps that was merciful. They landed on Tinian at 2:58 p.m., 14 hours after takeoff. The runway was lined with vehicles, with officers, with photographers. Word had already arrived that the mission was successful. The radio signal had been sent, target bombed visually. Results excellent. Return to base successful. Everyone knew what that meant. The war would end soon. Tibbets taxied to the parking area, shut down the engines, climbed out of the cockpit. He was greeted by General Carl Spaatz, commander of the Strategic Air Force in the Pacific. Spaatz pinned the Distinguished Service Cross on Tibbets' chest. Photographers took pictures. Reporters asked questions. Tibbets answered mechanically. He said what he was supposed to say. He talked about the mission, the weather, the bomb's performance. He did not talk about the city. He did not talk about the people. He did not talk about the mushroom cloud. That night, there was a celebration. The officers' club was packed. Champagne flowed. Toasts were made. Tibbets was the guest of honor. He sat at the head table, smiling when he was supposed to smile, nodding when he was supposed to nod. But inside, he was empty. He could still see the mushroom cloud. He could still feel the shockwave. He could still hear Lewis's voice, "My God. What have we done?" He went to his quarters early. He sat on his bunk in the dark. He did not sleep. He thought about Hiroshima. He thought about the 160,000. He thought about whether he had done the right thing. He had no answer. He would search for an answer for the next 62 years. He would never find one. The Enola Gay had dropped its bomb. The war would end soon. But for Paul Tibbets, the mission was not over. It had just begun. The flight had taken 14 hours. The aftermath would take a lifetime. While the Enola Gay droned steadily back toward Tinian, while Paul Tibbets ate a box lunch of ham and eggs and tried to sleep in the co-pilot seat, while the crew debated quietly whether they had saved the world or ended it, the city of Hiroshima below them was ceasing to exist. The silence of the American bomber was matched by a different kind of silence over Hiroshima, a silence not of peace, but of shock. A silence so profound that it swallowed sound itself. For the first few seconds after the detonation, there was no noise. The blast wave had traveled faster than sound. The light had traveled faster than everything. People saw the flash before they heard the explosion. And for many, there would be no sound at all. They were simply gone. At ground zero, directly beneath the detonation point over the Shima hospital, the temperature reached 4,000 degrees Celsius. Human beings did not burn, they vaporized. Their bodies turned to carbon in an instant. Their shadows were etched onto stone steps, onto concrete walls, onto the pavement of streets, dark silhouettes where a person had stood blocking the thermal radiation. These shadows remained long after the bodies were gone, ghostly imprints of lives extinguished in less than a second. A woman climbing the steps of a bank. A child waiting for a tram. A soldier standing at attention. They were frozen in time, burned into the architecture of the city they had lived in. These shadows became the most haunting evidence of the bomb's power. They were not statistics. They were people. And they were everywhere. Beyond ground zero, within a 1-mile radius, the destruction was nearly total. Wooden houses, which comprised most of Hiroshima's residential areas, did not just collapse, they exploded into flame. The thermal radiation ignited clothing, hair, wood, paper, anything combustible. Fires erupted simultaneously across the city, merging into a single firestorm that consumed everything in its path. The oxygen was sucked out of the air to feed the flames, creating winds that howled at hundreds of miles per hour, pulling people into the inferno. Those who survived the initial blast faced a choice: burn to death in the buildings, or flee into the streets where the air was too hot to breathe. Many chose the rivers. They threw themselves into the Oda River, seeking relief from the heat. The water boiled in places. People drank from it to quench the burning thirst caused by radiation, not knowing it was contaminated with ash and bodies. They died anyway. Dr. Michihiko Hachiya was in his hospital when the bomb fell. He was 50 yards from ground zero. His diary, published later as Hiroshima Diary, provides one of the most detailed accounts of the aftermath. He wrote, "I saw a flash of light. Then I was thrown into the air. When I came to, I was in the rubble. I could not see. I could not hear. I crawled through the darkness." Hachiya was blinded temporarily by the flash. His hospital was destroyed. His staff was dead. Yet he spent the next weeks treating survivors with no medicine, no equipment, no electricity. He amputated limbs with kitchen knives. He treated burns with vegetable oil because there was no morphine. He watched people die slowly, painfully, from injuries that should have been treatable. He wrote, "The living were jealous of the dead. The dead were at peace. The living suffered." Hachiya's words capture the moral inversion of Hiroshima. Survival was not a blessing. It was a burden. Then there were the children. Thousands of school children had been mobilized to clear fire breaks in the city center. They were outside when the bomb fell. They were exposed directly to the thermal radiation. Their skin peeled from their bodies. Their clothes fused to their flesh. Many walked through the streets in a daze, arms held out from their bodies to prevent their burning skin from touching their sides. They did not cry. They were too shocked to cry. They walked like zombies, murmuring, "Water. Water." But giving them water often killed them faster, as their internal organs were perforated by the blast. Parents searched for their children in the morgues, but there were no morgues. The dead were piled in the streets, burned beyond recognition. Identification was impossible. Families never knew if their loved ones had died or survived. The uncertainty was a torture that lasted for decades. The radiation sickness began weeks later. At first, survivors seemed to recover. Their burns healed. Their injuries stabilized. They thought they had survived. Then, suddenly, they began to bleed. Their gums bled. Their noses bled. They vomited blood. Their hair fell out in clumps. Their white blood cell counts dropped to zero, leaving them vulnerable to any infection. A simple cut became fatal. A mild fever became death. Doctors did not understand what was happening. They called it the strange disease. They did not know it was radiation poisoning. The American military knew. The Manhattan Project scientists had predicted the effects of radiation. But the information was classified. Medical teams were sent to Hiroshima to study the effects, not to treat the victims. They took blood samples. They measured radiation levels. They documented the decay of human tissue. But they did not bring antibiotics. They did not bring plasma. They treated the survivors like laboratory specimens, not human beings. This betrayal, the trauma. The victims felt not only attacked by the bomb but abandoned by the world. One survivor, Shigeki Mori, was 12 years old on August 6. He lost his entire family. He spent days digging through rubble looking for his parents. He found his mother's body under a collapsed wall. He buried her in a shallow grave in the garden. He marked the grave with a stone. Years later, he returned to the site. The stone was gone. The house was gone. The city had been rebuilt. There was no evidence his mother had ever existed. Mori spent the rest of his life collecting the names of the dead. He created a registry, not of numbers, but of names. He found 85,000 names. He knew there were more. He knew that 160,000 was a minimum. Each name represented a story cut short. A teacher who never taught another lesson. A doctor who never healed another patient. A mother who never held her child again. These are the ghosts that Tibbets never saw. He saw a flash. He saw a cloud. He saw a mission accomplished. He did not see Mori digging through rubble. He did not see the rivers filled with bodies. He did not see the hospitals where doctors tied gauze to burns that went down to the bone. The Japanese government in Tokyo did not know what had happened. Hiroshima's communication lines were cut. No reports came in. For hours, Tokyo assumed it was a conventional bombing raid, perhaps a large one. But no planes were reported. Only one B-29 was seen. It did not make sense. It was not until a reconnaissance plane flew over Hiroshima later that day that the truth began to emerge. The pilot radioed back, "Hiroshima is gone." The phrase was simple. The meaning was catastrophic. An entire city, erased. The military leadership was stunned. They had no framework for understanding this weapon. They consulted scientists. The scientists explained the possibility of an atomic bomb. But Japan had no atomic program capable of producing such a weapon. They knew the Americans were advanced, but this was beyond comprehension. The emperor was informed. He broke protocol and demanded an end to the war. The military hardliners resisted. They wanted to fight on. They wanted to defend the home islands. They did not believe the Americans had more than one bomb. They were wrong. 3 days after Hiroshima, on August 9, 1945, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. This time, Tibbets was not the pilot. He was on the ground, preparing for potential future missions. He watched the reports come in. Another city destroyed. Another 70,000 dead. The cumulative toll was now approaching 230,000. The logic of deterrence was clear: surrender or be annihilated. The Japanese government surrendered on August 15. The war was over. The invasion was cancelled. The million casualties projected for Operation Downfall were never incurred. This was the justification Tibbets held on to. He had saved lives. He had ended the war. But the math of war is never clean. You cannot weigh 160,000 dead civilians against 1 million hypothetical soldiers. You cannot balance the scales of morality with statistics. The dead were dead. The survivors were scarred. The world had changed. In the immediate aftermath, Tibbets was hailed as a hero. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. He was invited to meet President Truman. He was featured in newspapers across America. The headline read, "The Man Who Ended the War." But Tibbets avoided the spotlight. He declined interviews. He refused to speak about the human cost. He spoke only about the mission, the technology, the success. He was careful with his words. He knew that if he acknowledged the suffering, if he expressed regret, it would undermine the justification for the bomb. He had to remain firm. He had to believe it was necessary. Because if it was not necessary, then it was murder. And he could not live with that. So he constructed a wall of certainty around himself. He repeated the official narrative: it saved lives. It ended the war. It was justified. He said it so often that perhaps he began to believe it. But belief and truth are different things. And the truth was written in the shadows on the walls of Hiroshima. The crew of the Enola Gay dealt with it differently. Some embraced the hero status. They wrote books. They gave speeches. They defended the mission publicly. Others retreated into silence. Captain Robert Lewis, the co-pilot who had written, "My God, what have we done?" in his log, struggled with alcoholism in the years after the war. He died in 1983, haunted by the mission. The bombardier, Thomas Farabee, remained quiet. He said little about the mission until his death in 2000. The navigator, Theodore Van Kirk, was more outspoken, defending the decision until his death in 2014. Each man carried the burden in his own way. There was no manual for what they had done. There was no precedent. They were the first humans to wield the power of gods. And they had used it to destroy a city. The psychological weight was unprecedented. They were not just veterans. They were something new. They were nuclear veterans. And the world did not know how to treat them. Back in Hiroshima, the survivors began the long process of rebuilding. But rebuilding was not just physical. It was psychological. It was social. The Hibakusha, as they were called, faced discrimination. People feared they were contagious. People feared their children would be born with defects. Employers refused to hire them. Families refused to let their sons marry Hibakusha daughters. They were stigmatized for surviving. They carried the shame of the bomb along with the scars. Many hid their status. They did not tell their neighbors. They did not tell their co-workers. They lived in silence, afraid of being discovered. The government provided some support, but it was minimal. The focus was on rebuilding the economy, not healing the people. The pain was swept under the rug, hidden beneath the new concrete and steel. But the pain remained. It passed from generation to generation. Children heard their grandparents whisper about the flash. They saw the scars on their arms. They learned not to ask questions. The silence became part of the culture. This silence extended to the international community. For years, the full extent of the radiation effects was suppressed. The American occupation censored information about the bomb's aftermath. Photographs of the victims were confiscated. Films were banned. The world saw the mushroom cloud, but not the melted skin. The world saw the victory, but not the suffering. It was not until John Hersey's book, Hiroshima, was published in The New Yorker in 1946 that the truth began to emerge. Hersey told the stories of 6 survivors. He humanized the statistic. He forced the world to look at the faces behind the numbers. The issue sold out immediately. It was read by millions. It changed the conversation. But for Tibbets, it was another burden. He read the book. He said it did not change his mind, but it made him understand the suffering. Understanding and regret are different things. One can understand pain without regretting the action that caused it. This is the psychological armor that allowed Tibbets to sleep at night. He focused on the macro, the million lives saved by avoiding invasion. He did not focus on the micro, the 160,000 lives taken in an instant. He traded 160,000 specific lives for 1 million hypothetical lives. It is a calculation that ethicists still debate. Was it utilitarian justice? Or was it mass murder? There is no consensus. There is only the silence of the dead and the voice of the man who killed them. In the years following the war, survivors began to write letters. Some to the American government. Some to Truman. Some to Tibbets. They asked why. They asked how. They asked for acknowledgement. Tibbets received some of these letters. He did not reply to most. He kept them in a box. When he died, the box was found. The letters were brittle, yellowed with age. Some were angry. "You are a murderer." Some were pleading. "Why did you do it?" Some were forgiving. "I know you were following orders." Tibbets read them. He did not burn them. He kept them. Why? If he felt no regret, why keep the evidence of pain? Perhaps because deep down, he knew that 160,000 ghosts cannot be ignored forever. Perhaps because even a man who says he sleeps peacefully knows that peace is fragile. The ground zero of Hiroshima is now a peace park. There is a museum. There is a cenotaph with the names of the dead. Every year, on August 6th, survivors gather. They ring a bell. They observe a minute of silence. Tibbets never attended. He was invited once, in the 1990s. He declined. He said his presence would cause controversy. He was right. His presence would have turned a memorial for victims into a debate about justification. He chose to stay away. He chose to let the dead rest without his shadow over them. But his shadow was there nonetheless. Every bell rung, every name read, every moment of silence was a reminder of the man who dropped the bomb. He could not escape it. No matter how far he flew, no matter how many miles he put between himself and Japan, the shadow followed. Because it was not outside him. It was inside. It was in the memory of the flash. It was in the sound of the shockwave. It was in the knowledge that he held the trigger for the end of the world. And he pulled it. The legacy of Hiroshima is not just about one man or one bomb. It is about the threshold humanity crossed on August 6, 1945. Before that day, war had limits. Cities could be destroyed, but not instantly. Armies could be defeated, but not with a single weapon. After that day, war had no limits. Humanity possessed the power to extinguish itself. Tibbets was the instrument of that realization. He was the hand that opened the door to the nuclear age. And we have been living in that room ever since. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima was small by modern standards. Today's warheads are 10 times more powerful. There are 13,000 of them scattered across the globe. The risk is greater now than it was in 1945. The lesson of Hiroshima is not just about the past. It is about the future. It is about the choice we face every day, to continue down the path of destruction, or to find a way to close the door Tibbets opened. He cannot close it. He is dead. The responsibility now lies with us. The ghosts of Hiroshima are not just in Japan. They are in every nuclear silo. They are in every war room. They are in every decision to prioritize strategy over humanity. Tibbets carried 160,000 ghosts. How many do we carry today? How many will our children carry? The mushroom cloud dissipated years ago. But the shadow remains. It falls over us all. And it asks us the question Tibbets could not answer. Was it worth it? Was any of it worth it? The wind blows through the empty windows of the Peace Memorial. The trees grow around the concrete. The bells ring on August 6th. The answers are silent. Only the question remains. And it is our turn to answer it. Not with words, but with actions. With choices. With the courage to say that 160,000 lives are not statistics. They are human beings. And no mission, no war, no ideology is worth extinguishing them without remorse. Tibbets died without saying sorry. We must not die without learning why. The ghosts are waiting. They are not asking for revenge. They are asking for remembrance. Remember them. Not as numbers. As names. As lives. As us. Because in the end, we are all one flash away from becoming ghosts. And the only thing that matters is how we choose to live before the light fades. For 20 years after the war, Paul Tibbets did not speak publicly about the mission. It was not merely a choice, it was an order. The details of the Manhattan Project, the specifics of the bomb, the identity of the pilot, all classified. Top secret. For 2 decades, Tibbets lived in a world where the most significant moment of his life was something he could not discuss. He returned to the United States a hero. Parades were held. Crowds cheered. But when neighbors asked, "What did you do in the war?" he could not give the true answer. He spoke vaguely about flying bombers in the Pacific. He spoke about test pilots. He spoke about anything except the Enola Gay. The silence was a wall, built brick by brick, separating the public man from the private one. And behind that wall, the memories waited. He continued his career in the Army Air Forces, which became the United States Air Force in 1947. He rose through the ranks, becoming a brigadier general. He flew jet bombers. He commanded units. He worked for civilian aviation companies after retiring in 1966. On the surface, his life was normal. He married Lucy Wingate in 1938, though they divorced in 1958, partly due to the strains of his career and the secrets he kept. He remarried. He had children. He tried to be a normal father. But his son, Paul Tibbets III, later revealed that the war was always there, hovering over the household like a storm cloud that never broke. "We knew," his son said in a 2010 interview, decades after his father's death. "We knew what he did. Everyone knew. But we never talked about it. It was the elephant in the room. If I asked about the war, he would change the subject. If I asked about Hiroshima, he would leave the room." This silence was not just protective, it was isolating. Children need to understand their parents. They need to know their history. They need to feel safe. But Tibbets' history was too heavy for a child to carry. He was the man who ended the war, yes. But he was also the man who killed 160,000 people. How does a son reconcile those two truths? How does a family live with the knowledge that their father is celebrated by some and cursed by others? The Tibbets household learned to navigate this contradiction by not navigating it at all. They walked around it. They spoke about school, about sports, about the weather. They did not speak about the mushroom cloud. But the silence spoke louder than words. It told the children that some things are too big to discuss. Some truths are too dangerous to speak. Some ghosts are too heavy to name. In 1955, the classification was finally lifted. Tibbets could speak. But by then, the world had changed. The Cold War was in full swing. The Soviet Union had the bomb. The threat of nuclear annihilation was no longer theoretical, it was daily news. People began to question the use of the atomic bomb. Was it necessary? Was it moral? Was it a war crime? Tibbets found himself defending his actions not just to historians, but to a new generation that saw the bomb not as a weapon of victory, but as a threat to existence. He gave interviews. He spoke to reporters. But he remained guarded. He spoke about the technical aspects, the flight, the bomb, the maneuver. He did not speak about the morality. He did not speak about the children. He did not speak about the ghosts. He built a wall of logic around himself. He cited the projected invasion casualties. He cited the Japanese refusal to surrender. He cited the emperor's intervention after the bomb. He had data. He had facts. He had the official narrative. But he did not have peace. Because peace is not logical. Peace is emotional. And emotionally, killing 160,000 people leaves a mark that logic cannot erase. His wife, Lucy, stood by him during the early years. She defended him. She said he was a patriot. She said he did his duty. But even she admitted in private that the burden was heavy. He carries it, she told a friend in the 1960s. He just doesn't show it. Not showing it is not the same as not feeling it. Men of Tibbets' generation were taught to suppress emotion. To show weakness was to fail. To show regret was to admit error. And Tibbets could not admit error. Because if he admitted error, then 160,000 deaths were not necessary. Then they were murder. And he could not live with that. So he doubled down. He became more rigid. More certain. More absolute. He built a fortress of certainty around himself to keep the doubt out. But doubt is like water. It finds the cracks. It seeps in. It waits. In 1975, Tibbets gave an interview to a British journalist. He was asked if he felt guilt. He looked the journalist in the eye and said, "I feel no guilt. I would do it again." The quote made headlines around the world. Protesters gathered outside his home in Columbus, Ohio. They carried signs, "War criminal. Murderer. Apologize." He received death threats. He had to move. He changed his phone number. He hired security. The world would not let him forget. He wanted to be a pilot. The world made him a symbol. He wanted to be a man. The world made him a weapon. This tension defined his later years. He became increasingly defensive. He argued with historians. He argued with survivors. He insisted that the bomb was necessary. He refused to attend peace conferences. He refused to meet with Hibakusha. He said it would be a circus. He said his presence would distract from the victims. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps his presence would have turned a memorial for victims into a debate about justification. But perhaps it would have been an act of humility. An acknowledgement of pain. He chose not to find out. He chose to stay away. He chose to let the dead rest without his shadow over them. But his shadow was there nonetheless. Every bell rung, every name read, every moment of silence was a reminder of the man who dropped the bomb. He could not escape it. No matter how far he flew, no matter how many miles he put between himself and Japan, the shadow followed. Because it was not outside him. It was inside. It was in the memory of the flash. It was in the sound of the shockwave. It was in the knowledge that he held the trigger for the end of the world. And he pulled it. His son, Paul Tibbets III, watched all of this from a distance. He loved his father, but he did not understand him. He saw the anger in his eyes when protesters shouted. He saw the stiffness in his posture when the subject came up. He saw the way his father would sit alone in the study late at night, staring at nothing. He woke up sometimes, his son said in that 2010 interview. In the night. He would sit up. He would stare at the wall. He wouldn't say anything. He would just sit there. Until morning. What was he thinking about in those hours? Was he thinking about the flight? Or was he thinking about the faces? We will never know. He took those thoughts to the grave. He died on November 1, 2007, at the age of 92. His cause of death was heart failure. But his family said he died of old age. He lived a long life. Longer than most of the 160,000. He lived to see grandchildren. He lived to see great-grandchildren. He lived to see the end of the Cold War. He lived to see the world survive the nuclear age. But he never saw forgiveness. He never asked for it. And he never received it. He died as he lived, unapologetic. Unbroken. Alone. In 1995, the Smithsonian Institution planned an exhibition about the Enola Gay to mark the 50th anniversary of the end of the war. It was supposed to be a historical display. But it became a political battleground. Veterans groups wanted it to celebrate the victory. They wanted to honor the men who ended the war. Survivors groups wanted it to mourn the victims. They wanted to honor the dead. Historians wanted it to tell the truth. And the truth was complicated. The exhibition was scaled back. Then cancelled. Then revised. The script was rewritten dozens of times. Words were debated. Victory versus tragedy. Liberation versus destruction. Tibbets was invited to fly the Enola Gay over the Smithsonian for the anniversary. He refused. He said he did not want to be part of a controversy. But the controversy was his life. He could not escape it. He watched the debate on television. He saw survivors weeping. He saw veterans cheering. He saw himself caught in the middle. He was 80 years old. He was tired. He wanted to rest. But the world would not let him rest. Because his story was not just his story. It was the story of the nuclear age. It was the story of the moment humanity gained the power to destroy itself. Tibbets was the hand that held the match. And the world wanted to know if he felt the heat. He said he did not. But his son said he did. The contradiction remains unresolved. The Enola Gay itself was restored over decades. Mechanics cleaned the fuselage. They repaired the engines. They painted the nose art. The name, Enola Gay, was stenciled again in bold letters beneath the cockpit window. It was hung from the ceiling of the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., in 1995. It hangs there still. People walk beneath it. They look up. They take pictures. They read the plaques. Some feel awe. Some feel anger. Some feel sadness. The plane is just metal now. It does not remember the flash. It does not remember the screams. It is an artifact. But the weapon it carried is not an artifact. There are 13,000 nuclear warheads in the world today. 9 countries possess them. The technology has improved. The bombs are smaller. More powerful. More precise. But the physics is the same. The fire is the same. The death is the same. Tibbets' mission proved that it could be done. That a single plane could destroy a city. That a single decision could end a war. That a single man could hold the fate of millions in his hands. This is the legacy of the Enola Gay. Not the plane itself, but the precedent. The normalization of mass destruction. The acceptance that civilians are collateral damage. The belief that the ends justify the means. These ideas did not start with Tibbets, but they were cemented by his mission. He opened the door to the nuclear age. And we have been living in that room ever since. So we return to the question that Tibbets refused to answer. Should he have apologized? Is it possible to apologize for 160,000 deaths? Would an apology have changed anything? Would it have brought the dead back? Would it have healed the survivors? Or would it have been empty words, spoken by an old man trying to ease his conscience? Some say an apology would have been a moral necessity. To acknowledge the pain. To validate the suffering. To say, I know what I did, and I am sorry. Others say an apology would have been a lie. Because Tibbets did not believe he was wrong. To apologize would be to betray his own conviction. To betray his crew. To betray the soldiers who would have died in the invasion. He chose conviction over contrition. He chose duty over remorse. Was he right? There is no objective answer. There is only perspective. From the perspective of the American soldier in 1945, he was a hero. From the perspective of the Japanese child in 1945, he was a demon. From the perspective of history, he is both. He is the man who ended the war and the man who started the nuclear age. He is the savior and the destroyer. These truths coexist. They cannot be reconciled. We must hold them both in our minds at the same time. The lesson of Tibbets is not about him. It is about us. It is about the systems that put men in positions to make these choices. It is about the machinery of war that turns humans into instruments. It is about the distance that allows us to kill without seeing. Tibbets was 30,000 feet above Hiroshima. He did not see the faces. He saw a target. Today, drone operators sit in trailers in Nevada. They kill people in Yemen. They see them on screens. They see pixels. They do not see faces. The distance has increased. The technology has changed. But the psychology is the same. Compartmentalization. Dehumanization. Duty. We are still creating Tibbets. We are still asking men to press buttons that kill thousands. We are still asking them to sleep peacefully afterwards. And we are still wondering if they can. The ghosts of Hiroshima are not just in Japan. They are in every nuclear silo. They are in every war room. They are in every decision to prioritize strategy over humanity. Tibbets carried 160,000 ghosts. How many do we carry today? How many will our children carry? The bomb dropped on August 6, 1945, has never stopped falling. It falls every time we choose violence over diplomacy. Every time we choose security over freedom. Every time we choose the easy answer over the hard truth. The mushroom cloud dissipated years ago. But the shadow remains. It falls over us all. The final image is not of Tibbets. It is of the Peace Memorial in Hiroshima. It is a ruin preserved exactly as it was after the blast. The roof is gone. The walls are broken. The windows are empty. It stands in the center of the city, surrounded by modern buildings, by life, by peace. But the ruin remains. A reminder. A warning. It does not speak of victory. It does not speak of justification. It speaks of loss. It speaks of the 160,000. It speaks of the children who never grew up. The parents who never came home. The future that was erased. Tibbets is gone. His plane is in a museum. But the ruin remains. And it asks us the question Tibbets could not answer. Was it worth it? Was any of it worth it? The wind blows through the empty windows. The trees grow around the concrete. The bells ring on August 6th. The answers are silent. Only the question remains. And it is our turn to answer it. Not with words. But with actions. With choices. with the courage to say that 160,000 lives are not statistics. They are human beings. And no mission, no war, no ideology is worth extinguishing them without remorse. Tibbets died without saying sorry. We must not die without learning why. The ghosts are waiting. They are not asking for revenge. They are asking for remembrance. Remember them. Not as numbers. As names. As lives. As us. Because in the end, we are all one flash away from becoming ghosts. And the only thing that matters is how we choose to live before the light fades. Paul Tibbets is dead. He died in his sleep on November 1, 2007, at the age of 92, in his home in Columbus, Ohio. His son reported that there was no pain, no struggle. He simply ceased to be. The funeral was private. The casket was closed. The Enola Gay was not there. It hangs instead in the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., suspended from the ceiling of the James S. McDonnell Space Hangar. It is preserved in pristine condition. The metal is polished. The paint is fresh. The name, Enola Gay, is stenciled in bold black letters beneath the cockpit window. Visitors walk beneath it every day. They look up. They take pictures. They read the plaques. Some feel awe at the engineering marvel. Some feel anger at the symbol of destruction. Some feel sadness for the lives lost. The plane is just metal now. It does not remember the flash. It does not remember the screams. It does not remember the 160,000 souls who vanished in an instant. It is an artifact. A relic. A piece of history frozen in time. But the weapon it carried is not an artifact. The technology is not obsolete. The physics has not changed. There are approximately 13,000 nuclear warheads in the world today. 9 countries possess them: the United States, Russia, China, France, the United Kingdom, Pakistan, India, Israel, and North Korea. Thousands are on high alert, ready to launch at a moment's notice. The bombs are smaller now. More powerful. More precise. A single modern warhead can destroy a city 10 times larger than Hiroshima. The delivery systems are faster. Intercontinental ballistic missiles can reach any point on Earth in 30 minutes. Submarines lurk beneath the oceans, invisible, carrying the end of civilization in their tubes. The technology has improved. But the fundamental reality remains unchanged. Humanity still possesses the power to extinguish itself. Tibbets' mission proved that it could be done. That a single plane could destroy a city. That a single decision could end a war. That a single man could hold the fate of millions in his hands. This is the legacy of the Enola Gay. Not the plane itself, but the precedent. The normalization of mass destruction. The acceptance that civilians are collateral damage. The belief that the ends justify the means. These ideas did not start with Tibbets, but they were cemented by his mission. He opened the door to the nuclear age. And we have been living in that room ever since. The ethical debate continues to rage, 78 years later. Historians, ethicists, military strategists, and survivors still argue over the necessity of the bomb. The traditional narrative holds that the bomb saved lives. That the invasion of Japan, Operation Downfall, would have cost 1 million American casualties and millions of Japanese lives. That the bomb forced the emperor to surrender. That it ended the war quickly. This narrative is taught in American schools. It is repeated in documentaries. It is the justification Tibbets held onto until his death. But revisionist historians challenge this narrative. They argue that Japan was already defeated. That the Soviet declaration of war on August 8 was the decisive factor. That the bomb was used to intimidate the Soviet Union, to begin the Cold War on American terms. They argue that the invasion casualties were exaggerated. That the bomb was not necessary. That it was a war crime. There is evidence to support both sides. There are documents to cite. There are testimonies to quote. But in the end, the debate is not about history. It is about morality. It is about whether it is ever acceptable to kill 160,000 civilians to achieve a strategic objective. It is about whether the lives of soldiers are worth more than the lives of children. It is about whether victory justifies any cost. There is no objective answer. There is only perspective. From the perspective of the American soldier in 1945, exhausted from years of fighting, facing the prospect of invading the Japanese home islands, the bomb was a relief. It meant they might go home. It meant they might survive. From the perspective of the Japanese child in 1945, walking to school on a sunny morning, the bomb was an apocalypse. It meant death without warning. It meant pain without end. It meant a future erased. From the perspective of history, Tibbets is both hero and villain. He is the man who ended the war and the man who started the nuclear age. He is the savior and the destroyer. These truths coexist. They cannot be reconciled. We must hold them both in our minds at the same time. This cognitive dissonance is the burden of the nuclear age. We live with the knowledge that our security depends on weapons that could destroy us. We live with the knowledge that peace is maintained by the threat of annihilation. We live with the knowledge that Tibbets' mission was not an anomaly. It was the beginning. The lesson of Tibbets is not about him. It is about us. It is about the systems that put men in positions to make these choices. It is about the machinery of war that turns humans into instruments. It is about the distance that allows us to kill without seeing. Tibbets was 30,000 feet above Hiroshima. He did not see the faces. He saw a target. He saw coordinates. He saw an objective. This distance was essential. If he had seen the children, he might have hesitated. If he had heard the screams, he might have turned back. But he did not. He could not. The system was designed to prevent that. The training was designed to suppress that. The language was designed to obscure that. Target neutralized. Mission accomplished. Enemy casualties. These phrases remove the humanity from the act. They make killing manageable. They make it bureaucratic. They make it clean. But it is not clean. It is never clean. Blood does not wash off easily. Ghosts do not disappear quietly. Today, the distance has increased. Drone operators sit in air-conditioned trailers in Nevada. They kill people in Yemen, in Pakistan, in Somalia. They see them on high-definition screens. They see pixels. They see heat signatures. They do not see faces. They do not see eyes. They do not see fear. They press a button. A missile fires. People die. The operator goes home for dinner. He kisses his wife. He plays with his children. He sleeps. The psychological compartmentalization is the same as Tibbets. The technology is different. The psychology is not. We are still creating Tibbets. We are still asking men and women to press buttons that kill thousands. We are still asking them to sleep peacefully afterwards. And we are still wondering if they can. Some report psychological trauma. PTSD. Moral injury. They see the faces after all. They see them in their dreams. They see them in the silence. But the system continues. The drones continue to fly. The buttons continue to be pressed. The ghosts continue to accumulate. Artificial intelligence is the next step. Autonomous weapons systems are being developed that can select targets without human intervention. Algorithms can calculate probabilities. They can assess threats. They can release weapons. They do not feel guilt. They do not feel regret. They do not see ghosts. They are pure efficiency. They are the logical endpoint of the trajectory begun with the Enola Gay. Technology designed not merely to protect the pilot from the enemy, but to protect the pilot from conscience. Tibbets carried the burden of 160,000 deaths for 62 years. He woke up at night. He stared at the wall. He carried the weight. Autonomous weapons promise to eliminate this burden entirely. They promise killing without conscience. Destruction without remorse. This is not progress. This is peril. When killing requires no moral reckoning, restraint disappears. When operators face no psychological cost, oversight weakens. When algorithms make life and death decisions, accountability vanishes. Who is responsible when an autonomous weapon kills a child? The programmer? The commander? The machine? There are no answers. There are only questions. And the questions are urgent. The ghosts of Hiroshima are not just in Japan. They are in every nuclear silo. They are in every war room. They are in every decision to prioritize strategy over humanity. Tibbets carried 160,000 ghosts. How many do we carry today? How many will our children carry? The bomb dropped on August 6, 1945, has never stopped falling. It falls every time we choose violence over diplomacy. Every time we choose security over freedom. Every time we choose the easy answer over the hard truth. It falls every time we dehumanize our enemies. Every time we justify collateral damage. Every time we forget that the enemy is also human. The mushroom cloud dissipated years ago. The radiation has decayed. The ruins have been rebuilt. But the shadow remains. It falls over us all. It is a shadow cast by the knowledge that we can destroy ourselves. That we have the power to end history. That we are the first species in the history of life on Earth capable of committing suicide. This is the legacy of the Enola Gay. Not the plane. Not the bomb. The knowledge. So we return to the question that Tibbets refused to answer. Should he have apologized? Is it possible to apologize for 160,000 deaths? Would an apology have changed anything? Would it have brought the dead back? Would it have healed the survivors? Or would it have been empty words, spoken by an old man trying to ease his conscience? Some say an apology would have been a moral necessity. To acknowledge the pain. To validate the suffering. To say, I know what I did, and I am sorry. Others say an apology would have been a lie. Because Tibbets did not believe he was wrong. To apologize would be to betray his own conviction. To betray his crew. To betray the soldiers who would have died in the invasion. He chose conviction over contrition. He chose duty over remorse. Was he right? There is no objective answer. There is only perspective. From the perspective of the American soldier in 1945, he was a hero. From the perspective of the Japanese child in 1945, he was a demon. From the perspective of history, he is both. He is the man who ended the war and the man who started the nuclear age. He is the savior and the destroyer. These truths coexist. They cannot be reconciled. We must hold them both in our minds at the same time. The final image is not of Tibbets. It is not of the Enola Gay. It is not of the mushroom cloud. It is of the Peace Memorial in Hiroshima. It is a ruin preserved exactly as it was after the blast. The Genbaku Dome. The roof is gone. The walls are broken. The windows are empty. The steel frame is twisted and blackened. It stands in the center of the city, surrounded by modern buildings, by life, by peace. Children play in the park nearby. Couples walk hand in hand. Tourists take pictures. But the ruin remains. It is not hidden. It is not restored. It is preserved as a warning. It does not speak of victory. It does not speak of justification. It does not speak of strategy or necessity. It speaks of loss. It speaks of the 160,000. It speaks of the children who never grew up. The parents who never came home. The future that was erased. It stands as a silent testament to the cost of war. To the price of peace. To the value of human life. Tibbets is gone. His plane is in a museum. But the ruin remains. And it asks us the question Tibbets could not answer. Was it worth it? Was any of it worth it? The wind blows through the empty windows. It makes a sound like breathing. Like sighing. Like weeping. The trees grow around the concrete. Their roots crack the foundation. Nature is reclaiming the ruin. But humans keep it standing. They reinforce the steel. They repair the cracks. They preserve the destruction. Why? Because forgetting is dangerous. Because remembering is painful. Because the truth is necessary. The bells ring on August 6th. Every year. At 8:15 a.m. The exact time of the detonation. The sound echoes across the city. It is heard by millions. It is broadcast around the world. It is a sound of mourning. Of remembrance. Of warning. The answers are silent. Only the question remains. And it is our turn to answer it. Not with words. But with actions. With choices. With the courage to say that 160,000 lives are not statistics. They are human beings. And no mission, no war, no ideology is worth extinguishing them without remorse. Tibbets died without saying sorry. We must not die without learning why. The ghosts are waiting. They are not asking for revenge. They are not asking for justice. They are asking for remembrance. Remember them. Not as numbers. As names. As lives. As us. Because in the end, we are all one flash away from becoming ghosts. And the only thing that matters is how we choose to live before the light fades. The choice is ours. The power is ours. The responsibility is ours. We cannot change the past. Tibbets' mission happened. The bomb fell. The city burned. The people died. We cannot undo that. But we can shape the future. We can choose to close the door Tibbets opened. We can choose to reduce the arsenals. We can choose to prioritize diplomacy over destruction. We can choose to see the humanity in our enemies. We can choose to remember that war is not a game. That weapons are not toys. That lives are not statistics. We can choose peace. Not the peace of silence. Not the peace of suppression. But the peace of justice. The peace of understanding. The peace of remembrance. The Enola Gay hangs silent in its museum cradle. It is a monument not to what we achieved, but to what we failed to achieve, the wisdom to recognize that true progress lies not in pushing machines to their limits, but in designing them to protect the humans who must operate them. This recognition, painful, costly, hard-won, remains our most valuable inheritance from that terrible conflict, not speed records or climb rates, but the understanding that capability without conscience serves not human advancement but human sacrifice. The rocket plane that could touch the edge of space ultimately could not touch the human heart. The pilot who could shoot down 18 aircraft in one day ultimately could not preserve his own humanity. The bomber who could destroy a city ultimately could not destroy the question of whether he should have. In these failures lies their greatest gift, permanent reminder that machines exist to serve humanity, not humanity to serve machines, that warriors exist to protect life, not extinguish it efficiently, and that the most advanced technology ever built remains worthless if it destroys the humanity it was meant to defend. This reminder, etched not in stone but in silent steel, not in words but in absence of the 160,000 who never returned, demands our attention today as urgently as it did in 1945. For Tibbets' ghost walks among us still, not in museum hangars alone but in every laboratory where engineers optimize for kill counts over human consequences, in every command center where commanders demand efficiency without regard for moral cost, in every war room where strategists calculate victory without counting ghosts. His whisper echoes across decades. Remember the 160,000 who vanished August 6, 1945, remember the pilot who carried their ghosts for 62 years, remember that true courage lies not in efficiently killing enemies but in preserving your humanity while doing so. Remember, and choose differently. Build not merely what you can, but what you should. Fight not merely to win, but to remain human while doing so. And remember always that the most dangerous failure in warfare is not tactical defeat but moral surrender, the choice to solve fascinating problems while ignoring the human beings who pay the price. This is Tibbets' final lesson, not written in combat reports or victory tallies, but whispered in the silence between heartbeats of every warrior who pauses before pulling trigger to ask not, "Can I?" but "Should I?" In that pause lies our salvation. In that question lies our humanity. And in that humanity lies our only hope of building future where revolutionary machines serve life rather than death, a future where speed serves safety, capability serves compassion, and engineering serves ethics. Tibbets could destroy a city in one day. But he could not destroy the ghosts it left behind. This failure, painful, costly, human, remains his greatest victory, proof that even in industrialized killing, humanity persists. The empty dinner place set by survivors for 62 years speaks louder than any victory claim, that some numbers should not survive the war, that some victories should remain uncelebrated, and that some ghosts must be carried not privately but collectively, if humanity is ever to learn that no human being should ever want to destroy a city in one day. This remembrance, simple, profound, enduring, is aerial warfare's only redemption. And it begins not with celebrating records, but with speaking names. Speak their names. Carry their ghosts. Preserve your humanity. This is the only victory that matters. This is the only record worth keeping. This is the only lesson worth learning from August 6, 1945. The light fades. The bells ring. The question remains. What will you answer?